Happy New Year. We are beginning a new series today. It is on the Ten Commandments, which are found in the book of Exodus, which is the second book of the Torah, Torah meaning law. The first 5 books are sometimes referred to as the Torah, sometimes called the Pentateuch, sometimes just called the first 5 books of the Bible. They were all written by Moses, and they lead, one of the big parts that the book of Exodus leads up to is the giving of the law. So let me remind you how we got here. In the sermon series recently, we have been going through the book of Exodus. Exodus is the second book. In Genesis chapter 3, the promise is made that God is going to send a rescuer. In Genesis chapter 12, we see the call of Abraham, and it is, God says it's through Abraham and his descendants that this rescuer is going to come. And so we follow Abraham and his descendants through Abraham and Sarah have Isaac. Isaac then has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. We actually end up going with the younger one, which is a little bit of an anomaly, but Jacob then has 12 sons. And we tend to follow Joseph most, but Joseph is not the patriarch in that society. He's one of the younger sons, but Joseph is going to be sold by his brothers into slavery. And as the book of Exodus ends, we now see everybody moving out of the promised land. God promised Abraham land and descendants. We see the descendants of Abraham moving out of the promised land to Egypt to avoid a famine. We then pick up with the book of Exodus. It's the second book. It's 400 years later. The book of Genesis ends. Everything is going well for the Jews. The book of Exodus opens, and it is not going well. They have fallen into captivity, and they are now slaves. And so they are crying out to God for their freedom. And so God raises up Moses, and we get the burning bush, and then we get the whole interface, the little cage match with Pharaoh. You got the 10 plagues. You've got the crossing of the Red Sea, manna from heaven, water from a rock. All of that stuff happens leading up to the Jews getting their freedom. They cross the Jordan River and they end up at Mount Sinai where they meet with God, and God gives them the 10 words, the 10 commandments, the law. These commandments serve to define the relationship. So men in their 20s tend to live in fear of the whole DTR, the define the relationship talk, but this is what we get with the 10 commandments. We're getting a covenant. This is how God and the people are going to interact. And God has already rescued them. He hasn't rescued them because they've been good. As a matter of fact, they don't even get the law until after they have been rescued, but he gives them the law. And I want to argue that the law is at least 3 things. One of them, the one we'll look at today, is that the law is a gift. The Jews have been slaves for 400 years. They have lost any kind of ability or insight about how to live independently. They don't know what it means to be free. They don't know how to be free. And so what God is going to give them is a set of rules, a set of directions, a set of insights. He's going to give them advice about how to create a society that is going to work, about how to live a life that is going to work. And so we get a bunch of law, actually, between Exodus chapter 20 and Numbers chapter 10. Numbers is one of the books in the Pentateuch. Between Exodus 20 and Numbers 10, there's a whole lot of law, not just the 10 commandments, but a bunch of additional laws, guidelines, directions, insights. So the law can be broken out into 3 buckets. I'm simplifying things, but it's a helpful simplification. You have a number of the laws that God gives to the Jews that fall under the realm of civil law. It's basically how they're going to be governed, because they are going to exist for quite some time in a theocracy. God is going to be their king. They're not going to have a separate government. They're not going to have separation of church and state or of synagogue and state. They're going to just have one overarching structure, and God is going to be king. So they have all these civil laws. They don't apply to us because we don't live in a theocracy. We live in a republic or a democracy, whatever, but God is not president. He's not king in the same sense. There's a second category of law that we find in Exodus through Numbers, and especially in the book of Leviticus. These are ceremonial laws. So these are laws that govern a lot of things about religion, and in particular about the sacrificial system, that do not apply to us because we no longer have a sacrificial system. Jesus fulfills all the sacrificial laws, and so we live independent of that. But there is a third category of law. We call this moral law, and these moral laws still apply to us today. So the first thing we can say about the Ten Commandments is that they are a gift. It is a moral code that we are to follow so life will work. Have a good day.